Delhi, 7:30 in the morning, and the elite of Indian teenagers arrive for school. The Indian economy is one of the fastest growing in the world. A key driver of that growth is education. Yet almost half of all children abandon formal schooling by the age of 11. A third of India's 1.2 billion population are illiterate. The government's aiming for 100% literacy by 2020 and wants every child to attend and stay on at school. India has always been educationally and socially divided. The haves pay for their children to be privately educated. Private schools like Bluebells in Delhi cater for around a third of the school population. They are still strongly influenced by the English, 60 years after British rule ended.
Gaining motivation from the Indian sepoys, the Indian peasants...
These students are taught all their lessons in English, unlike their counterparts in the state system.
More people who sided the British...
This revision lesson's looking at a key moment in Anglo-Indian history, the 1857 rebellion against British rule. But was it a mutiny or the start of the freedom struggle?
We are now going to be talking about two perspectives. One, which talks of it being a sepoy mutiny, and one which is talking of it being a first war of independence.
I believe it was the first war of independence because we can see that the Hindu and Muslim fought together like shoulder to shoulder. Then it was like almost half of the country was fighting against the British. So it is true that it started with the sepoys mutiny, but rather than it created awareness of all the people, it was a nationalism that was there. So I think it is the first war of independence.
Okay, so Swarnima's group talks of the feeling of nationalism being brought about through the revolt. Many sections of the society participated, so it couldn't be just a sepoy mutiny or just a peasant revolt. It had to be a wider scope.
I would like to say, ma'am, I'm not with Swarnima as she said that it was the first war of independence. The most important is, ma'am, they did not get their aim. Ma'am, they were lacking of aim, and ma'am, no one was one. Ma'am, they were fighting for their own reasons and reasons also, ma'am.
Ma'am, also, ma'am, if it was a war of independence, why it was suppressed so easily? And then also some societies of the Indian did not participate like the Brahmins and all. So, ma'am, if it was war of independence, why not all societies came in together, and why we did not achieve the main objective of the independence or the revolt?
Yes, it did get suppressed within a year. Yes, there was disunity. Yes, there was, let's say, an aimless fight, as Sudhanshu pointed out. There were also lots of people, lots of leaders who were in it because of their own personal reasons. But there were people beyond one class, beyond one section. Okay? So I'm again not reaching any conclusions yet. Let's take it further.
Ma'am, we cannot say that it is the first war of independence because, ma'am, there was no feeling of nationalism in the Indians. Because, ma'am, all people were just fighting for their kingdoms. Ma'am, there was nothing known to be a complete India there.
Okay. Anyone else to contribute, to contradict?
Ma'am, we are Indians, so ma'am, we obviously will think that it was the first war of independence because it was on a big perspective. But ma'am, if we see it from a British point of view, it did not hurt them or make any changes. It was just that the East India Company was...
Wasn't that a big move in itself, that the East India Company now was no more to rule India as it was? And it was sidelined, and it was going to be...
a bad name to the crown.
The fact that the crown had to step in and take over charge meant that the British were in somehow feeling threatened by the Indian community.
Ma'am, but ma'am, it just profited them.
Bluebell sixth formers are discussing partition. the division in 1947 of the British territory into the separate states of India and Pakistan.
This is what the map looks like now? Yes. Yeah? This, of course, is now free and it's a separate country, but this is what East Pakistan was. This is West Pakistan. Right? So that is the Cyril-Radcliffe boundary. What do you think was finally the role that the British played in dividing the country, in partition? Were they solely responsible? Were there other factors? What really was it?
There, ma'am.
They were?
See, when they were in our country, they somehow looted our country. They took away our riches. They exploited us.
Okay.
And before leaving, they created such a blunder in our country so that till date, we fight between Hindu and Muslims.
Yeah.
So at the back of our heads, we do have those grudges for the British.
But I disagree a little bit.
Yeah.
But it's not that the Britishers kind of ignited what we already had. The Hindu-Muslim rivalry was always there to start with. But the Britishers kind of took the opportunity. I mean, they saw that we can use this for our own good and they took the opportunity. But it is not that they are the sole reason. The Hindus and Muslims are responsible. The Indians, not Hindus and Muslims, the Indians are responsible for the partition as much as the Britishers are responsible. Because if they did not want to part, then they could have stopped it perhaps. Because
Ma'am, I agree with Mahashweta because the Britishers aren't solely responsible for all this.
Yeah.
They aggravated and entrenched social, problems between Hindus and Muslims were prevalent before also.
Give me examples of that.
During the rule of Akbar.
Yeah.
When Akbar ruled, even then there were fights between the Rajputs and the Mughals. So
But was it a religious fight?
It wasn't, but it was for political power. Even during independence, the Muslim League was formed for political power. Jinnah wanted more political power and hence he wanted that Pakistan should be created so that he gets more political power.
Since independence, the teaching of Indian history, like the country, has been through turbulent times. Not surprisingly, the British left behind a curriculum that portrayed their own role sympathetically.
See, there was a time when British rule was seen in celebratory terms. Now, you saw the establishment of law and order, peace, construction of roadways, railways, industrialization, agricultural growth, coming of democracy, which culminates education, coming of democracy, which culminates in nationalism and the making of the nation state. This is broadly, very schematically, what we refer to as the imperial view.
And I suppose when the Britishers came to know that Hindu and Muslim working together can be a threat for them is the revolt of 1857. Hindus and Muslims throughout the country, they worked together.
Right.
And that is where it is said in the history books that it shook the foundation of the East India Company establishment and everything.
Yeah.
So I suppose that is when they realized that perhaps they could act as a catalyst and, just separate of the two countries. It would be better off.
Yeah.
This pro-imperialist approach ran alongside what the Indians call communalism,
Let's see what happens
seeing historical events through the prism of religion and focusing on the Hindu-Muslim divide. But the rise in Indian nationalism opposed the imperialist view.
The nationalist histories from the 1920s and 30s have critiqued imperial histories, and they have suggested that the period of British rule is a period of impoverishment, immiserization. It is a period when there was drain of wealth from India. It's a period when industries decline, agriculture decline, peasants, workers, middle classes, landowners, landlords, everyone suffered. Will the nationalists offer us the dark side of British rule and see British rule as something which is to be opposed because it is its impact is so detrimental for the growth and development of India. Instead of developing in India, it underdevelops India. That's the nationalist view.
They initiated the divide and rule policy, which subsequently led to the partitions.
Okay. The British are also blamed for having divided India, not just along religious lines, but also along many other lines. Do you people know that? Who are the groups, which are the groups that they pitted against each other? Is it just the Hindus and the Muslims? the educated Indians against uneducated Indians, the zamindars against peasants, the rich against the poor. I mean, a Hindu zamindar, he's a Hindu, so he's pitted against a Muslim. He's a zamindar, so he's pitted against a Hindu peasant also. So several, horizontal, vertical divisions created.
There was a move in the late 1950s and early 60s amongst historians to rethink the entire syllabus in schools and to argue that history textbooks, the old history textbooks of the colonial period can no longer be taught. We should have new textbooks written which will represent the new ideas of India, which will be part of the remaking of India as a secular, democratic, national and nation as such.
Like you said, the elite people have always, dominated over the poor. The condition, like, it's somehow still the same. It's like the bridge between the rich and the poor is still very big in India. And I suppose what true development would be to, merge it to some extent.
This continuing re-examination of British rule isn't only preoccupying Delhi's private elite. 70% of India's population live in the countryside, and many rural children, especially girls, don't go to school. In 1986, Prime Minister Rajiv Gandhi tried to redress the balance. His vision was this. It's 5 a.m. and live-in staff are already at work, rousing pupils at this JMV school in Faridabad, an hour's drive from Delhi. It's one of a network of highly selective, rural state boarding schools set up by Gandhi, where for 9 months of each year, pupils live on site, their parents visiting one Saturday in 4. All 500 pupils are provided with free education, textbooks, uniform, food, stationery, and even toothpaste. They're highly competitive. For 80 new places each year, 3,000 children sit an exam. Though they start before dawn, they study into the evening, with teachers on hand to help with homework. The school ethos emphasises self-reliance and hard work above all else. They promote patriotism and a sense of national cohesion.
Best position. India is my country. And all Indians are my brothers and sisters. I love my country. And I am proud of it. I shall always strive to be worthy of it.
The intensive focus on learning generates a very academic approach to teaching history. These sixth formers are learning about the history of partition and Britain's involvement through the division of Bengal.
लॉर्ड कर्जन ने कहा क्या कि बंगाल जो है geographically it's a very big state and it is very difficult to rule over Bengal from a single center. एक नया स्टेट फॉर्म किया गया, ईस्ट बंगाल एंड आसाम, और ये बंगाल की जो हिस्टोरियंस हैं वो ये कहते हैं कि डिवीजन के पीछे जो ब्रिटिश सरकार की नीति थी वो बांटो और राज करो की नीति का एक अंग था। वो चाहते थे कि हिंदुस्तान में जो ग्रोइंग नेशनल मूवमेंट है उसको कमज़ोर किया जाए, and so it was possible only by dividing the two major communities of India, Hindus and Muslims. लेकिन जो सबसे ज़्यादा पावरफुल जो लॉजिक है वो स्टेटमेंट है गवर्नमेंट ऑफ इंडिया के होम सेक्रेटरी थे लॉर्ड रिस्ले। In 1904 he is saying United Bengal is a power. Our purpose behind division is to break the opponents of our rule and so to weaken them. अगर हम बंगाल को विभाजित कर देते हैं तो हमारी सत्ता के जो सबसे शक्तिशाली विरोधी हैं वो टूट जाएंगे और हमारी सत्ता को और अस्थायित्व मिलेगा।
All pupils are expected to clean and tend the school. Today, these 550 highly selective schools achieve the best exam results in the country.
Till 1904, Congress was loyal to the British rule. But in 1905, Congress demanded Swaraj, or you can say self-rule. And the demand of Congress was bound to create a different relation with the British rule.
They're learning about how the division of Bengal led to the formation of a political party to represent only Muslims, opposed to the Indian National Congress, which was non-sectarian.
In fact, the high-class Muslim people were instigated by the then Governor-General Lord Minto. You see, Congress is a party of only Hindus. Why don't you have your own parties? They are not going to represent your interest. Congress is a party which represents only Hindus. जब ये बात जमींदार मुसलमानों के दिमाग में भरी गई तो 1906 में with the help of Lord Minto, a new party was formed that was Indian Muslim League. अब मुस्लिम लीग की पॉलिसी बहुत स्पष्ट थी। They will be loyal to the British government and in return they will get reservation in job and reservation in legislative assemblies. कि मुसलमान माइनॉरिटी में हैं और एक माइनॉरिटी कम्युनिटी के पॉलिटिकल इंटरेस्ट को प्रोटेक्ट करने के लिए रिजर्वेशन जो दिया गया, पृथक निर्वाचन मंडल जो दिया गया, should religion be infused in politics?
सर ये एक धर्म राजनीति का एक अंग है सर, ये इसका आधार नहीं हो सकता सर।
धर्म राजनीति का
एक अंग है सर,
धर्म राजनीति का अंग नहीं,
आज भी है सर।
Back in Delhi, at another private school, students are looking at what brought the British to India in the first place.
Okay. Now, initially, how the British came to India?
As traders.
Okay. So now, what was their major motives? Okay. So you find that initially, the balance of trade was in India's favor, and that is why the Mughal kings, they agreed for the trade. Is that clear?
Yes.
Okay.
Ma'am, they introduced three things, ma'am, like they divided the administration into army, police and civil services.
So, administration.
Since the 1960s, a series of governments have stamped their politics on the teaching of history. But with the economic growth and modernisation of the country, educationalists felt a fresh approach was needed.
Now they did what?
the children today are global citizens. They are no longer concentrated or they're no longer restricted by the national boundaries. Today, a student studying in our school might be going to UK for further education. And if we do give him a wrong connotation of what British rule has been in India, then that restricts his whole viewpoint.
Now, civil services was called what? Civil services was called? I used a particular term, the steel frame of India, isn't it? So now you find that the police, we have adopted after independence, the police set up exactly ditto. The civil services exactly ditto. Now it is known as what? The permanent executive. The governments may come, the governments may go, but the civil services stay.
3 years ago, another rewrite was ordered. Bhattacharya led a team of 70 historians who developed a more thematic view of imperialism.
We have to see what colonialism does to a society. The question is not simply to see this is good or bad.
Let's come to the most important introduction of the British into India. That was the Western education. Now, if you see...
But moving from a chronological to a thematic approach angered politicians of all shades, as the head of the new child-centred national curriculum recalls.
When the first book started coming out in 2006, my goodness, what a storm we were facing every day. I mean, this campus was a constant cyclonic weather zone with the media coming out hunting, literally, for a kill. It was impossible, actually. I haven't faced TV cameras for that reason, and I don't. Precisely because the media just don't have the desire to understand. They're out to kill. And they just didn't see that we were after some longer goals. I would like to leave a legacy where whoever comes in power feels a little hesitant to remove these textbooks.
Despite the media backlash, the changes have been welcomed by Indian teachers, many of whom for the first time sat on the consultative committees.
6 chapters, earlier they had 10 chapters. But whatever 6 chapters they are in depth. It is not just that they have touched superficially, they have tried to study in details with the help of case study, empirical study. They are coming with certain sources. In most of the cases, they are using oral sources. In earlier books, they had almost ignored it. In partition, when lesson starts, they have interviewed people. What is the experience of the people who suffered?
We had this thing in our country that we used to blame everything on the Britishers. Why is there poverty? Because the British looted us and took our wealth away. But now we realize, no, population has been a major problem. Population increase has not been because of the Britishers. It's been because of our own deeds. So this is one example that I'm giving you that yes, you're absolutely right in saying is that the way we perceive history has definitely changed and it has helped us to manage our own affairs in a better way.
Take responsibility.
Yes, take responsibility rather than blaming somebody else.
We had different states, we had different languages, there was no uniform language also. That is why a uniform language with English as a medium was introduced in India. Now this gave them what? This gave them what? Manpower. Yes, they needed manpower in army, in police, in the civil services. But the benefit for us was what? It was immense.
Ma'am, they could spread their thoughts to the British, ma'am, they could conversate with them.
It brought about unity. Political unity, administrative unity, and a language which could unite and spread ideas. Clear?
In Britain, the study of the empire is about to be made compulsory at Key Stage 3. As part of his rewriting exercise, Professor Bhattacharya spent time looking at British textbooks.
British history textbooks I found were very well produced and pedagogically they are sensitive to issues, the kinds of issues that I have talked about, some of those issues. But I found the books at one level disappointing. And I found many of the ideas and the framing structures to be, old-fashioned and conservative. They seem to be emphasizing on dynastic histories. You move from early Tudors to late Tudors to the history of the Elizabethan England, etc. That's one type. So, and we moved away from dynastic histories long, long back. In England, there doesn't seem to be that effort. Possibly it is linked up with the fact that the royalty is still possibly important. Therefore, a certain lineage of royal history remains important. But the framing is one which does not allow space for an alternative history, which actually in Britain has been developing for the last 30 years. It is surprising that social history, which is so vibrant in England, is not something which has been able to change the framework of history writing for school textbooks.
Despite the brickbats, Bhattacharya believes it's essential for all children to have a more complex view of history, and that it's a process that other nations need to go through, including Britain.
You have history which does not really have adequate space for history of social groups other than the elites. Workers, peasants, marginals, the commoners, the people who continue to live in the commons. Their histories are not there in the textbooks. If I was to ask, what would a child who comes from that background, what kind of sense will they make of this history? I would obviously feel that they can't relate to this history, what is being taught, which is the history of dominant groups. History is political. You cannot get away from it. You can deny it, you can repress it, you can refuse to accept it. But the fact is, it is political. There is a way of interpreting which reveals your worldview, which reveals a vision, which in some way legitimates a particular world.